Good evening. The new Archbishop of Canterbury says that he is praying for those really let down by the church in Sussex following a series of child abuse scandals. Visiting the county today ahead of his enthronement this week, Justin Welby called for total honesty and transparency and absolute acknowledgement of the harm that's been done.
Well, it follows a report into a profoundly negative culture within the Diocese of Chichester, which led to 2 decades of child protection failures within the Church of England in Sussex. Sarah Smith reports.
It was the last stop on what he's called his journey of prayer before Thursday's enthronement as the leader of the Church of England. And while the people came in their thousands, tackling the shadow cast over the church by some in the Diocese of Chichester was not something he felt he could ignore.
I think what it requires is total honesty and transparency, an absolute acknowledgement of the great harm that's been done, and a real self-awareness that enables us to change dramatically. And I think all those are being shown by Bishop Martin.
It was only last month that Robert Coles, a retired priest from Eastbourne, was jailed for 8 years for abusing 3 boys in the late 70s and early 80s. He was one of 3 former Church of England priests charged last year with sexual offences against children. And an inquiry ordered by Justin Welby's predecessor, Rowan Williams, concluded there had been a profoundly negative culture within the diocese which had led to 20 years of child protection failures. Roy Cotton, now dead, abused many children through the 70s, 80s and 90s. One of his victims was Phil Johnson.
Bishop Martin Warner, the Bishop of Chichester, has offered to meet with some of the other survivors, and he has met with me personally. It would be very nice if the Archbishop was willing to do that so that we could all move forward towards some kind of reconciliation and closure in all of what's happened.
I think the mere fact that he's chosen to go to Chichester today, when he could perhaps have been at the Pope's inauguration, to make this announcement and to also to acknowledge the pain and the difficulties that the victims have suffered, I think is a profound step by the new Archbishop.
The story of sexual abuse and the Church's failings in dealing with it are a blot on its recent history, but one which so far the new Archbishop shows no sign of shying away from. Sarah Smith, BBC South East Today.
Well, let's cross live to our Home Affairs correspondent, Colin Campbell, who's outside Hove Crown Court for us. Colin, you've spoken to some of the victims of child abuse within the church. What are they saying about this?
Well, Polly, the victims and survivors that I've spoken to today believe the Archbishop of Canterbury's words are both positive and significant. Justin Welby has today clearly acknowledged the suffering of those who've been sexually abused by priests in Sussex. The latest, of course, to be jailed was Father Robert Coles, who pleaded guilty to sexual offences against 3 boys back in the 1980s. But some survivors still believe and feel as if there was some attempt to try to cover up the abuse within the Diocese of Chichester. That is something which is still actively being investigated by the Church itself. Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury also today asked survivors to try to forgive, and one victim I spoke to said that that simply isn't an option for him today, and that the abuse he suffered and endured is something that will stay with him for the rest of his life.
Thanks, Colin.